Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Rage's episode 55. I am joined, as always, by Pandemonia. And we're going to be keeping today's episode quite short. We've already been doing a lot of videos on first impressions for Witchwood cards. So if you want to check out those and find out more about what we think about all the cards that have been revealed, check out the YouTube page. They're in their own playlists, so you can watch them all there, and we'll keep updating it pretty much daily at this point, now that we're right in the middle of the reveal season. So yeah, we'll keep updating it as often as we basically have time to make the videos. So we're not going to be talking about any specific cards today, but I am quite interested to get an idea on what your thoughts so far for this expansion have been. You know, the cards we've seen revealed, the theme. How do you feel going into the Witchwood and at this pretty important time, this standard rotation?
Whenever there's a standard rotation, I'm always super excited because it means that as much as you could argue, you could say that the meta is quite diverse right now, it literally shakes everything upside down. So I really like the fact that, all those decks that you've been loving or hating for the past year completely get flipped upside down,
Yeah.
Some decks continue to exist, but new mechanics also, makes the game a lot more exciting, a lot more diverse. The Echo Rush, I'm looking forward to Echo. Just get all that value.
Yeah. I think some of the mechanics are looking quite, and they seem to be using the mechanics quite liberally, which is something that I like. We've already seen quite a lot of Rush minions and quite a few interesting ways to use Echo. We've seen cards that give all your other minions Echo or Rush. Two different cards, so that's quite important to basically give you a lot of options in the way you can build the decks and kind of combo with those two mechanics in particular. So it's good to see them using them quite liberally rather than some mechanics they've kind of shied away from using much in previous expansions.
They gave maybe a handful. Like some of the previous expansions, I think were a bit disappointing where they introduced the new mechanic, but they literally gave a half a dozen minions it.
Yeah.
And some of them were just terrible. So
yeah,
it's like you say, it's good that they are giving more mechanics.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think some people are maybe not so excited for the set because they're struggling to see where some of these cards fit in, maybe thinking that they're a little bit underwhelming. The big thing to remember is that standard rotation we talked about and how that's going to really shake up everything in terms of the cards that you're going to be seeing play because so many are leaving. So, the power level required for this set and for the cards in this set to see play is a little bit lower than, previous sets like Kobolds and Catacombs in particular, which came right at the end of a standard year.
Yeah, definitely. Now the fact that, like you said, a large chunk of cards, it means it's a large reset. So, obviously you still have the classic cards, but, there's a lot of cards now. Kind of people look at it as have to find replacements. If you still want to play a deck you love, you're gonna. I think a lot of people have that mindset where they're looking at the new cards, going, "Okay, what is this replacing?" More than what new decks are going to obviously emerge from this rotation.
Yeah. So talking about new decks and favorite cards so far, are there any particular cards that have stuck out to you? We're not going to talk too in depth about them, but maybe these are some cards to whet people's appetites, and maybe these cards maybe got you thinking about deck ideas.
So for me, it's always quite ironic that the cards I tend to like are usually the ones that don't look the most flashy. So they just look solid. So for the one that jumped out at me immediately was actually the neutral card Rotten Apple Bomb. It's the 5-mana 4/5 taunt, and death will restore 4 health to your hero. So it's not a flashy legendary. It doesn't, for me it's just a really solid minion. It's good in for me. I think it's going to be good in mid-range control decks, and just keep you alive, for that much longer.
Yeah, and it also has taunt, which can be quite important for some decks. You're one of your favorite classes of all time, Warrior. And we've kind of seen Taunt Warrior fall largely out of the meta. Do you think maybe with this and some of the other taunts, cards like Phantom Militia, that we can see a Taunt Warrior coming back?
Even potentially, I foresee there could even be an odd Taunt with Baku. So you could have that upgraded here. So even though you might think it's a little bit anti-synergistic, because with the quest you obviously change your hero power. The fact that the upgraded hero power keeps you alive in the early game, I think is quite relevant. The fact that you'll be able to, once again, shield slam shenanigans. I mean, there's still that, what's that one that destroys all your armor and deals damage?
Reckless Flurry. Yeah.
I think that's an odd cast card, if I remember correctly.
3 mana. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of potential for an odd taunt warrior.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
militia.
Yeah, there's a lot of good 3 mana taunts at this point with Stonehill Defender. Important because it gives you 2 taunts for the price of 1 in terms of only having to draw 1 card. And then obviously there is cards like Phantom Militia that you mentioned as well, which can give you multiple taunts in a turn, especially later in the game, that can just help you finish your quest as fast as possible, right?
And Ali Armorsmith is still in standard, and Direwolf actually. Ali Armorsmith's rotating out, but there's still Direwolf, Direhorn Hatchling, which I think is quite a powerful drop.
Yep, that is definitely a powerful minion for the deck. So for me, one of the other interesting cards that's really caught my eye has been Vivid Nightmare, and this is more from a combo deck perspective. I think Vivid Nightmare has some potential for maybe a combo priest that can allow you to, let's say, use a Spellstone to bring back cards like Malygos and Prophet Valen, and then combined with some copying some Radiant Elementals, or possibly even copying one of the big kind of buff cards. You can maybe make your Mind Blasts hit them for lethal. So I think it's definitely going to take a lot of refining. It's kind of maybe the new big priest shell with Barnes rotating out, and this is how we can use cards like Eternal Servitude and Shadow Essence in the future. But overall, I mean, it's definitely, I think, going to be a little bit weak in many matchups, and it'll be particularly weak to something like that odd cost warrior that you talk about, because the tank up is definitely going to take you outside of range of the combo.
It's going to be literally like old school freeze mage versus control warrior days, where all you do is you click armor up every turn. Tank up, rank up was.
Oh boy, how far we've come! Only need to go all the way backwards.
Good times.
Yeah. So speaking about coming quite far, we have a tip for this week. Our tips, this is our Magma Rages tip to keep you from raging. And this week we're going to be talking about not being so scared of particular cards. So what is a good way to kind of talk about to this, or what? Explain our tip, please, Pandemonia.
So one of the things once you're playing, for a while, you're not just playing cards, you start worrying about what your opponent's going to be doing. And so currently, in recent times, if you play any, let's say, aggressive deck, so let's say Dude Paladin or Murloc Paladin, and you play against the Priest, which are quite popular, you'll have faced probably more than one times, sometimes even 3 or 4 times, you'll face Duskbreaker. For those of the 4-mana 3/3 dragon, if you are holding a dragon, deal 3 damage to all minions.
Yeah.
So basically Hellfire and a stick. And so the thing is, especially, like if you and I were helping your players, you'll say, okay, you have to think about what your opponent is playing and, consider playing around it. So we're using Duskbreaker as an example, but in other classes, examples are like playing around Flame Strike or Blizzard or Consecration or, generally AoE kind of cards, or cards that heavily punish you, for doing a certain play. And so the tip revolves around going, a lot of the time it is right to play around it, but there are some times where, even if you are aware that the card exists, you kind of need to ignore it and pretend it doesn't.
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes down to weighing up the risk versus reward. And it comes down to, a lot of the times, assessing where would you say you're heading on board or behind?
Yeah, so there's, you talk about that risk reward and your kind of state on the board. That's the important thing to look at. Like, if you're quite far ahead, you can really afford to play around whatever these big swing cards are. In Arena, there could be things like MC Tech or anything like that as well. But it's basically just any kind of swing card. Whereas if you're quite far behind or your chances to win are relatively low in a matchup, you do kind of have to take a little bit more of a risk. These are basically, we're talking not just about Duskbreaker, it's about any of these kind of cards that, stick in your mind. Like, oh, I really hope he doesn't have Alaneth here, or I really hope he doesn't have Void Lord or Possessed Lackey Dark Pact, whatever it is that's, the bane of your existence. Don't fear it. Think about, what are the kind of percentage chances? Have they been keeping a card in their hand since the mulligan? Do you know they have a dragon in the hand? Have you seen some kind of Dragons Matters card played already? And if you have, if it was something like Dragon and Operative, what's the chance they actually had 3 dragons in their hand? Because they would need another dragon just to activate the Duskbreaker. So you kind of have to figure out the odds of these kind of things and try and use those to your advantage to make your opponent more frustrated than you are when they don't have the answer, rather than just always playing in fear. And then when you eventually do are forced to commit into that Duskbreaker or that Void Lord, by then you've given them enough time to actually get that card.
Yeah, and like you said, part of and what ties in is part of the consideration is time. So you've got to. So it's weighing up. Okay, if I go into it now, what are the chances I have it? Versus obviously the longer you go on, they don't have it. Also, I mean, it ties in a little bit with also trying to bait them out. So let's say you are scared of it, you kind of like, let's say Duskbreaker, you kind of present a board that is a little bit. It presents enough of a problem, sort of a threat, without overextending your hand, and so it all comes. A lot of this comes with experience, and sometimes probably a bit of gut feel. You kind of just have a feeling the way your opponent is playing, they don't have Duskbreaker, or the way they are playing means they do have Duskbreaker. Sometimes it takes a bit of a feel.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of depth to it when it comes to making reads and how you can kind of bait something and play around. But I think that's something we can go into a little bit more depth in a future Magma Rages tip. This one is really just about not being afraid of the card. A common known kind of phenomenon in card games is often called the Finkle Factor. It comes from Magic the Gathering. John Finkel's a very well-known, one of the best Magic players ever to have played the game. And, at the peak of his power, people kind of, they presumed he had the answer a lot of the time to whatever question they were asking on the board, a lot more than he does, right? It's kind of, in Hearthstone, it's like when you're playing against the Warlock and you're like, oh, they always have the file, or you're playing against the Priest and they always have Duskbreaker. It's about being more scared because of the class and remembering the bad scenarios rather than actually playing to the odds and kind of taking out all of your post-traumatic stress from the scenario, and rather just playing to the cold hard facts rather than any kind of fear. And that's really what the tip is about today. You'll probably notice your win rate go up or go down depending on whether or not you're making the good reads and those other kind of things, but you can definitely alleviate a lot of anxiety and frustration by getting rid of that fear.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes with also, sometimes you have to accept, okay, I'll make this play. If he has the Hellfire, if he has the Fire or the Duskbreaker, I lose. But if he doesn't, it's enough of a risk where I basically snowball and win the game.
Exactly.
And that's constantly what you've got to weigh out. And you have to accept that sometimes, yes, they are going to have, and I'll face this, they are going to have 4 Duskbreakers. They are going to have 3 Ice Blocks. They are going to have 4 Blizzards. Sometimes these things happen. And eventually you got to go, okay, but percentage-wise, I still made the right play.
Yeah, and looking at it from the, that kind of cold, hard facts side, it also helps you kind of not get tilted as much when you do lose, if you have that kind of perspective. We are, of course, not saying just, always play into Duskbreaker, always play into the File, always play into Void Lord or whatever, Flame Strike, whatever it is. It's more just about, don't always not play into it, rather. Don't ever go to one of those two extremes. You got to try and find the right medium that's best to optimize your win
hard
rates.
and fast. Usually beginning, like we say, the general advice is play around these cards, but like the advice, just make sure you don't always play around them.
Yeah.
Make sure that there are times that you don't.
Yeah. And some players that are very good at doing that are the players that you're going to be seeing in the HTT events that we've been seeing so far over the last couple months this year. And we had HTT Oslo this last weekend, which is actually the final HTT event for this season. So for the final tour stop, that is, for determining points for this Hearthstone kind of championship tour season, for determining qualification for the first playoff event, which is going to be in May, I believe. Or was it the championship that's in May? I think the playoffs are going to be April and the championship May, if I'm not mistaken. But, we'll definitely be seeing a lot more of those events coming up once the qualification is over. There is still, of course, this last month of ladder to get out the way, and you're going to see a lot of players pushing for the ladder finishes they need, or if they're in a comfortable enough position already, maybe they had a good result at the major, then they can be a little bit more relaxed. But looking at some of the players that are going to be a bit more relaxed, that did have a good result at HTT Oslo, we see some players that might not be that well known to a lot of the more casual viewers, but a lot of these names are names we've seen a lot in the tournament scene, especially in Europe, where the depth of the tournament scene is really, really deep. We saw Turner walk away as the winner, beating Faley in the final. He had an absolute crushing run through the top 8, going 9-1 basically in games in the top 8 in what was a last hero standing tournament. So that means some decks did some really heavy work for him there. He beat Faley, and then having beaten Old Boy before that in the semi-finals. Old Boy, a name a little bit more familiar to some players. He's done decently at some HTT prelim events before as well. He was at the Summer Championships, the final one
of the
season.
championships where I remember he was there.
Yeah. So he was at the Summer Championships as well, I think it was.
Swaggermeister, I think, was also in the Major Championships as well. Like, his name also is, like, a lot of these, it's like you've heard them before somewhere, I mean, like, they're not as common as your, let's say your Kalento, but a lot of these are well-known good players.
Yeah. It was an all-European top 8, which is kind of worth noting. I mean, it obviously does make a big difference that it is in Europe.
It's in Europe, yeah.
But, some people note, America dominated, like, let's say HTT Toronto. But, I mean, it's in Canada, so, it's much closer for them. So, obviously, there was a lot more Europeans at the event. But kind of surprising to not see any of the players that did travel actually make it. I think people often underestimate the impact that actually traveling to these events, and especially if you travel close to the actual time of the event starting, adjusting to the jet lag and all that kind of stuff can have.
And the stress of just transport and accommodation and those sort of things as well. Yeah.
So coming up, there aren't any real HTT events happening this week. There are qualifiers starting for some of the HTT events for next season. And Dreamhack have also announced their involvement with the HTT Tour. They've traditionally hosted a lot of events that have had HTT points up for grabs. And now they have announced that they're going to have 6 tour stops, starting with Dreamhack Tours in France. And then they will have the usual Dreamhack Summer and Winter ones in Sweden, as well as a couple others. The big standout there was that there's no Dreamhack Valencia or Sevilla, any of the kind of Spanish events, which is a bit of a upset to the Spanish community, which is pretty passionate about Hearthstone. But the kind of trade-off there is that they're getting the Dreamhack Tours, which is big for the French community, which hasn't really had these kind of HCT point-giving Dreamhack Hearthstone events before. Dreamhack is very exciting. We're going to see that. That's definitely going to be relevant for the next couple seasons for HTT Tour stops. So we're going to be seeing those. Those are all going to be last hero standing format as well. So the same as HTT Oslo, which was kind of run in a very Dreamhack style. They're all pretty much the same format as Oslo. 256, 4-pick 1 ban, last hero standing. Pretty much just keeping with what has been established as the Dreamhack standard now. And the big interesting thing there is just seeing the last hero standing versus the conquest that we usually see in most of the other tour stops.
Yeah, and just sort of as a sort of a warning, sort of to any players following these tournaments, just always bear that in mind in terms of when looking at people's lineups and deck choices and things. Always be aware that conquest and last hero standing are significantly different enough formats. So that these things are, taking the same lineup to a Conquest and to a Last Hero might have two slightly different results.
Yeah, like the certain decks that are more polarized in their matchups often do well in Last Hero Standing because you can use them as counter decks. A good example being Quest Rogue. There was, I think, 47 or 49 Quest Rogues out of 250
there were a lot of Quest
players at or 256 players, sorry, at Dreamhack. Oh, sorry, at HTT Oslo. So that's kind of a kind of relevant comparison. That's more than you would see at a Conquest tournament where you have to get a win with your Quest Rogue, which can kind of be weak to the aggro decks. So that, as well as the tech choices that players make. The tech choices for tournaments in general are different to what it might be for ladder, especially when you are considering a ban. And then the tech choices that you have for Last Hero Standing and for Conquest are also kind of different. So even within the deck lists, be a little bit careful about net decking those lists.
And the strategies and those other things.
Yeah. But this is going to be a short episode, as we said. Make sure you check out the rest of our impression videos if you want to find out more about what we think about some of the cards that have been revealed. Also, you can find out what I think pretty much immediately as I see the cards on Twitter. I tend to just kind of tweet out the cards. So also, if you just want to follow all the cards that are being revealed, a good place to find that is my Twitter, which you can see right here at @dib_gaming. And for Pandemonia, who sometimes comments on the tweets as well, especially if I tag him in any that might involve Control Warrior, you can find him on Twitter at PandemoniaZA. Please go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video as much as possible. All the exposure really, really helps. And you can also find me on Twitch as well for the end of season grind, D1B_ on Twitch. That's all. Just ends in an underscore.
It's like underscore, and people are waiting for like the next part.
Just ends in an underscore. We'll see about getting a better name or a better Twitch handle eventually. But yeah, that's all we have for this episode. Thanks a lot for joining us, and yeah, make sure you check out those other videos, and see you next time.